It's the ML Sports Platter, and we bring in the New York Times bestselling author of Sandy Koufax. A lot of her other books, major bookstores, Amazon.com, major bookstores nearby. Get them all. I've read them all. They're all amazing. Sandy Koufax, The Last Boy, Mickey Mantle. And looky here, she's on to talk about the new one. What a great time to get it during the World Series as well. It is called Make Me Commissioner. I Know What's Wrong with Baseball and How to Fix It. It's all brought to you by RB Source of Central New York and Burn Dairy. Jane, what a treat it is to have you back. It's been too long.
I know. It takes me so long to write these. I mean, other people turn out stuff, quickies. I'm going for quickies next time, and don't make a joke.
Okay. All right. Well, hey, look at this now. I mean, the game of baseball, the people who've loved it forever still love it. You love it. I love it. There's still great things about it, but there's still stuff inside that's kind of making people run away. Get into Make Me Commissioner here. How did it come to fruition, and why did you write it? In terms of the inside walls of the sport, there must have been something where you said, I don't like this, I'm writing a book.
Yeah, it's actually, it's a great story, and I do tell it in the book, but I called it Make Me Commissioner. I Know What's Wrong with Baseball and How to Fix It. And the World Series this year is a good example of why I also like to say, I know what's right with baseball and why it's so important to fix what's still wrong with baseball. It started actually at the Otesaga Hotel at breakfast with Sandy Koufax and Joe Torre the year that Mariano Rivera was inducted unanimously. The
2019.
First and still last, only one. Ichiro should have been the next. But and they're having this conversation, you know the word ginks from Brooklyn? Ginks was a word in the neighborhood, it meant guys who hang out. And Joe and the Torre boys and Koufax weren't exactly the same year or the same school, but they're ginks from Brooklyn. And they were talking about today's game. And there was this, it was like they were talking in tongues, in baseball tongues. I didn't, and Sandy says, and the pitchers don't know half the time where the ball's going. And Joe responds and says, yeah, and because of that, they have to lean over this way and this, and they're talking so fast. And the rule there, you don't ask for autographs, you don't write notes, you don't take notes, and you don't record anything. So I cannot repeat verbatim. I was starstruck, I'm not supposed to be, but I was. And at the end of that, Joe says, hard to watch. And Sandy says, I don't watch. And I thought, how is it possible I'm the person at this table, who still is watching game day, during dinner parties that I host, right? That was shocking to me. And it is shocking to a lot of people because it is such a different game. It's been turned inside out. And yet, the last couple of games, we've seen the glories of what baseball can be when we don't muck it up. We've also seen, last night's or 2 nights ago's 18-inning World Series game 3, was it? Game 3? Yeah. I got that right? There were too many men left on base and people pressed too hard, and the Dodgers tried to hit the ball out of the park at every at-bat. And part of the reason it went so long, but there was a rookie hero, Will Klein, who stepped up and pitched 4 shutout innings when he had never been allowed on the mound before, practically. And there was no ghost runner, right? Talk about letting baseball end the way baseball is supposed to end. And baseball turns the screw on drama in a way. And it wasn't the point. The point wasn't that it was timeless. Timelessness is for Shakespearean sonnets. The point was that the way it's constructed allows for kind of a turning of the dramatic screw. Mm-hmm. That you're practically breathless, sitting there waiting to see what's going to happen, which unexpected person is going to come through, or which expected person is going to break out of his slump. In this case, Freddie Freeman, and. It's just still the best game if we just let it be. I traveled all through baseball in 2023 at every level, trying to see how the new rules imposed by Major League Baseball that year, were working and what else needed to be done. And what I found, in every dugout from Little League on up was a lament for the human element and the way that that has been compromised by optimization and efficiency. And, in these games that are allowed to go to their conclusion naturally, you see the human element. You see Will Klein. You see Freddie Freeman. And you see people who shrink from it. And you see, Shohei, my God, Shohei. But these games also demonstrate, because the Dodgers are the Dodgers, the reason they have the guy who gets on base 9 times and then needs an IV is because of how much money they have. Now, the Toronto Blue Jays are not exactly slackers when it comes to spending money. They did spend $500 million on Vladdy Jr. Good investment, I would say. But, the reason they had Yamamoto, who volunteered to go down to the bullpen and warm up for the 19th inning, was because of the amount of money they have. And that problem caused what I like to refer to as my predecessor, Rob Manfred, to go in front of people with cameras and pencils and pens and say last year, just before the beginning of spring training, there's going to be a lockout. It's the new norm. When the collective bargaining agreement ends in December 2nd, 2026, we're going to lock them out. And, it's not really a bad thing. It's like, using a 22 rather than a nuclear weapon. Well, what business goes out to the public as a beginning of a new year and says, we want you here. We want you to spend your money on $18 beers. We want you to bring your kids, but don't get too invested in your team or your guys, because then we're going to break your hearts over money.
Yeah, no doubt about that. So how do we take the analytical part, which a lot of people don't like, and those are the anti-baseball people from the traditional standpoint. And I get it, the analytic part. I know that some of it does have to be implemented. I'm a big WAR fan, for example. I know about laptops and tablets and technology and all these different things we use. And I know that things evolve. I'm okay with some of it, not all of it. It's something, not everything. How do we take the blended part? How do we take the traditional and the modern and blend that part together to make baseball look like baseball still?
I think you're exactly right. I feel the same way. I've been very surprised at people who've read this and said, oh, she hates analytics. It starts at Driveline with their, talking to their young batting guy, Jason Ochard, who now runs the Red Sox minor league system, whose antidote to Driveline, which, maximized the max heave pitching, is a very humanistic way of interpreting and using data and technology. The point is, you have to put people in control who say it can't be everything. At some point, you have to defer to the human being in the dugout or in the batter's box who's seen it, who's been there. And Joe Torre always talks about being in the foxhole. And I'm not big for, war metaphors, but, I understand completely what he was saying. Dusty Baker, who to me was the most human in baseball, said, I asked him what happened to empiricism in the dugout, right? And he said, I don't want to repeat the curse words, but he said, I got these little punk ass guys coming down here and telling me, blah, 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 that my eyes don't know what my eyes are seeing, and that my eyes will lie to me. Well, this man's been in baseball, had been at that point 50 years in uniform, right? More or less. And more rather than less. And there's got to be an acceptance, and there got to be people in charge who recognize, who don't have enough hubris or so much hubris that they're not willing to say, there's something these guys know that I don't, right? Yeah. And they can only be gotten from experience. And it's part of what's wrong, forgive me for going off here, but it's part of what's wrong throughout the country. It's interesting to me that data science is the only unassailed science in our country at the moment, right? Yeah. Data science is all. It knows everything. It doesn't. And one of my, most cherished moments in this book is talking with a data scientist galore, Pekko Hosoi at MIT, who created their sports analytics lab, who said the problem with analytics and AI isn't that it won't give you an answer to whatever your question is. It'll give you a very plausible looking answer. And she said, and the guys who write these algorithms are really good at what they do, but they don't have what in data science is called domain knowledge, i.e., they don't know baseball, right?
Yeah.
And she said, and worse, they don't think it's important. And that's the nub of it, is finding a way to make sure that the people who are creating these things, if they don't acknowledge it themselves, that there's another layer, there's somebody above them who says, wait a minute, it does matter if you've been there. It does matter if you've spent 7,000 games in uniform. And, you're starting to see a little of it, I think, with putting guys who were baseball players who actually played in positions of general manager and president of the clubs, like Chris Young and Breslow and other guys like that. But that's where it's got to go.
Yeah. Jane Leavy, our guest here, a couple more for the great author, best-selling author of Sandy Koufax here on the ML Sports Platter. The new one is Make Me Commissioner. I Know What's Wrong with Baseball and How to Fix It. Major bookstores nearby. And, of course, Amazon.com and your online book places. We're going to get to her dog before this is over as well.
I have to call her.
Cooper made a sneak appearance. I'm just making sure he's not chewing something in the background. All these things in October that it makes it look more like the game we know and love, like you said, no ghost runner and all the rest. There's the bigger bases and the ghost runner and all these things. I did like the pitch clock. I think that's been very good.
I agree.
Speeding up the game a little bit. Some of the branding things they've tried, but man, these City Connect uniforms, the bigger bases, just the 7,000 pitching changes a game. It's funny because I have a lot of buddies of mine who don't like baseball at all. I have a lot of buddies of mine who like it a little bit. They'll watch the big games only if the Yankees are in it or whatever.
Right.
I have other people who used to be fans, now they're not at all. And among all of those people, there's always this feeling of this is why baseball stinks. And it's all in this category. And yet they don't come to the other side to see exactly what the game really truly is, because what's been robbed from us, that's why they liked it. So why can't you see that? Like, if you're saying to me that the game stinks, right, it's like, oh, well, it doesn't have this, it doesn't have that. But you grew up with it. The people who did love it, you're telling me that you don't love it now because it doesn't have what the NFL has or what college football or college basketball, this and that. But you loved the game at one point. So why don't you love it? Well, it's this, it's this, it's this. Well, yeah, exactly. Because what you're used to, it's not there anymore. And it's hard to get through to those people. Am I making sense with
Yes,
that?
totally. And
Okay.
and I think what happened to baseball is, ironically, hoisted by its own petard, right?
Yeah.
Baseball became the nexus for analytics because it had been collecting numbers and preserving them and collating them since Chadwick designed the scoring system.
Sure.
And so they were way ahead of any other sport. One Harvard professor who specializes in analytics and stuff and big data said, the Yankees still know more about Oakland, although there's no Oakland anymore, forgive me, than GM knows about Ford because they've had this whole numbers analysis going for more than 100 years. But as it evolved, what happened was the optimization, which is a big number, and efficiency, the drive for efficiency in conserving your 3 outs and made baseball more boring. Whereas other sports, like the NFL, analytics, and the best example is that analytics tells them it's good to go for it on fourth down. So it's made the NFL games more exciting. It told the NBA, a 3-point shot line would be a really cool thing. And then you might, give birth to Stephen Curry. So whereas baseball, it flattened it and it diminished, the nuances and the things that used to be exciting. For example, there was the Jacob Young catch, young center fielder for the Nats. One of the few great things about this year were his two catches at Citi Field, where he goes up and he pulls back a home run. Fans love that. Why not? And the ball drops out of his glove as he drops down to earth, and he kicks it back into his glove. And the unanimous reaction the next morning was, "That's a Savannah banana play." And the answer was, it made me furious. Right. No, that's a Major League Baseball play. Right. That's the kind of thing that enlivened baseball when defense mattered, and when skill mattered, and when craft mattered, and when you didn't just put all the importance on, home runs, strikeouts, and walks, the three true outcomes, which now dominate the game. So teaching people what baseball can be involves showing them what it can be. And that means drafting players who are more multidimensional. I spent time with Ron Washington, who I adore and who I think was completely screwed by the Angels recently. I'm not saying that he should have, at his age, gone back and managed another year, but they really didn't need to go out of their way. He was the manager of the Los Angeles Angels, who had quadruple bypass surgery this year and had to leave the team. And they went out of their way to say, "Oh, and this isn't because of his health that we're not bringing him back. No, it's because of his performance." And guess what? He had those guys playing, and he was teaching them how to cut the corner of a base to give yourself 2 more inches, which gives you 2 more seconds to be safe at second when you're rounding the base the correct way. Mm-hmm. So all of the craft that I love watching, the beautiful pivot of a double play, it's gone. It's not taught and it's not practiced, and that's part. To me, that's as much part of the glory as the home run. I found myself speechless to be in agreement with Alex Rodriguez during the Yankee Boston series earlier during this postseason when he said home runs are boring. And I went, yes, exactly. There's too many of them. I don't even look up anymore, right? Yeah. For Freddie Freeman's last night, I looked up. Yeah. But, it's ubiquitous now. And there's no texture and nuance left.
And I try to explain to people that I'm 45 years old. I mean, it's not 75, but it's not 20 either. And I try to tell people, like, when I try to explain the game that I've interviewed 35, 40 Hall of Famers. I've covered the induction every year since who knows when. I've been in big league clubhouses. I've interviewed best-selling authors like yourself. And it's not a get off the lawn thing with baseball for me. I'm trying to tell people, like, you can take the modern and traditional, you can make the game great again, and you can stop with the artificial stuff. I try to tell people, you're such a fan of the NFL. Well, how would you feel if every single time you went down the field, the goalposts were over here one time, over here another time, the end zone was double the size, and then we played 5 more games, and then Derrick Henry ran the ball in for, I don't know, 6 extra touchdowns a year, and the kicker was given 3 extra points every extra point, and then we called both of them the greatest players of all time, and we made 50-50 a big deal where Ricky Henderson's going, hold my beer, or Tim Raines and all these guys, or you alluded to Young with the catches. It's not calling Young Willie Mays or Ken Griffey Jr., but it should be more of not, oh, that's a Savannah banana play. It's echoes of Willie Mays, echoes of Ken Griffey Jr., echoes of name the next guy. That's baseball, and it still should be romantic and magical and traditional and historical and beautiful and the pastime, yet it can still be the new time with the pastime. And I'm trying to tell people, like, I'm not trying to push you guys off my lawn. I'm trying to tell you that imagine the other sports that you truly love, where you say all these bad things about baseball. Imagine those changes in your sport. It would be so artificial, you wouldn't even know what hit it inside the lines. You wouldn't even know what hit it.
The problem is, Mike, that the younger sports, and I'm not saying people didn't play basketball for a long time in this country, but the institutions, the younger institutions, the NBA and the NFL, didn't have the reservoir of numbers and history to which they became beholden. So they were able to make what became organic changes at an appropriate time and in an appropriate way. And they have evolved. All sports have evolved.
Sure.
Baseball isn't, they used to pitch underhand. Let's not pretend that it's been, exactly the same since 1865 when they were practicing on Civil War, battlefields when the white flags came out.
Right.
Of course it has to change. It's that they didn't change for so long, that they sat there and watched as their audience diminished and as the environment of mass media changed, and they didn't keep up with it. They could have intervened. They could have asserted some control, but they didn't. And now belatedly, they're trying to, interestingly, there was a pitch clock on the books that no one ever seemed to notice or think it was important to, apply it. Baseball is the only game. Try to imagine Travis Kelce calling timeout, sideline and saying, wait a minute, I need a pause to center my thoughts. That's what was going on in baseball. And no one said, what's going on here? That's adding, time and minutes and it's becoming unwieldy. In 2021, there were 3 minutes and 52 seconds between balls put in play. And so when your never baseball friends and mine said nothing happens, they were right. Mm-hmm. Nothing was happening. Yeah. And they allowed it to get that bad before starting to make changes that feel antithetical. I mean, thank you for, undoing the most egregious shifts, but, they still shift, as you well know. It's just not as obvious as it was. The bigger bases, as Ron Washington, my beloved Ron Washington says, try teaching them how to take advantage of the bag rather than just giving them the bigger bag.
That's right.
Right?
That's right. Yeah, absolutely.
And, look, the Ghost Runner isn't going away. And I understand why it's not going away. The travel is impossible for, in this world and the way they're scheduling it. And if they add any more layers of playoffs and more games, they're going to have to either shorten the season or shorten the games themselves. And if they do that, I'm out, right? But why not, let them go through the batting order during the regular season one more time? End it at the 13th inning. In fact, if I know this, they certainly should. 75% of all extra inning games end by the end of the 10th.
Yep.
So the Ghost Runner being, set down there in the 10th inning is preemptive. You don't need, it wasn't necessary. That's right. Adjust. Why can't they stand up and say, you know what? That was really, now we see. And we get it, Let's change the Ghost Runner rule. Yes, we'll keep it. We understand about planes and but it doesn't have to be so antithetical to what the game they built that was so beautiful to begin with.
Yeah, I didn't have as much a problem with the shift because I blame the teams more. I mean, it's almost like a 2-3 zone. It's like, well, the shift is there. Dude, lay down a bunt down third enough times.
But they can't, Mike. And the reason they can't is twofold. One, they're not taught how to do it. Two, it's a lot harder to bunt a 100-mile-an-hour, four-seamer up under your hands than, Spud Webb's, dunk. But he was a bad pitcher back in the day. A good bad pitcher.
They can't, but they also won't.
Well, but look, you've had a couple. Look at the bunt play where against where Mookie instigated the wheel play. That was Rob Thompson the manager of the Phillies put on a bunt, and analytics people are going to say, see, shouldn't have done it, wasted an out, ended the series, ended the game. It can be a beautiful weapon. It should be deployed in the right places, in the right time, by people who are taught how to do it. I spoke at length, and there's a chapter in the book about this young kid, Chase DeLauder, who I first met up at the Cape Cod League. And he was the 16th round draft choice of the Guardians. He has played almost not at all because of a sequence of improbably awful injuries. But he was put on the roster for the playoffs this year, which was, incredible. He got a hit, made an error in his first, time out in the outfield. That's human. That's the human element. But, I asked him, did your coaches ever say to you, because he's a big guy with a big swing, why don't you choke up and go the other way when the shift is on? Oh, no, it'll mess up your swing. Don't do that. It'll mess up your swing. Well, you think they said that to Mickey Mantle? Think Mickey couldn't adjust? You got to make it important enough to teach.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Final thing for you, real quick anyway, is that, I always ask this to authors. You put the blood, sweat, gut, and tears into this thing. I mean, what do you hope when they hit this last page of this awesome book? What do you hope people say about it?
Well, make her commissioner. Look, I think
you got my vote.
I think people like us, Mike, the game wasn't going to drive us away after all this time, right? Mm. But the question is, what are they going to do to grow a new audience?
Sure.
And they need to step out of themselves and say, okay, we have a demographic issue here, right? We got too much inventory, number of games, and too many seats. And then we have televisions panning those upper decks and showing swaths of emptiness. So why don't we let all kids age 10 and under get in free? Imagine MLB calling a press conference and saying, we really mean it. We know things are expensive. We know it's hard to afford our game these days for the people we want to be here. So here's what we're going to do. Grandma, grandpa, mom, dad, aunt, uncle, whoever, bring a kid, right? I'm not talking about the $300 seats that you see empty behind home plate. And I had a guy, an economist, sports economist, run numbers. And based on the Cubs menu choices of 2023, it would have cost the Cubs all of $4 million to do that. Nothing. I'm not here to say that that's chump change. To you or to me, not chump change. And most people, not chump change. But to the 30 people who own Major League Baseball clubs, it is. Yeah. And even the ones who call, poorhouse the most. Let the kids in. Let them have purchase on the game. Feel the dirt. Smell the grass. See the enormity of a ballpark. Looking up and saying, whoa. Let all the kids run the bases. Do a Savannah Banana thing. Let ball players on the IL, go into the stands and say hi. The way Joey Votto did in his last year at Cincinnati. Tear down the barriers between the game and the people who want to love it. Morgan Sword, who is the executive vice president for baseball operations, very thoughtful guy. I like him a lot. When I went back to see him after, all these years of reporting, he said, what did you learn? And I said, what I learned is that people want to love baseball. They just want baseball to love them back.
Mm-hmm. No doubt about that. The last thing that's non-book related. How about this dog right here on the back of the book? Is Bette the dog around, the infielder?
Bette Boo.
Firebirds. She coming along?
Pause a second. I'll get her. Okay.
All right. Let's see. Here
there
we go.
Bette the dog, who is an infielder for the Orleans Firebirds.
I love it.
The Cape Cod League. Where the manager, who's called a coach because it's still a college league,
of course,
lets her take infield practice with his team and throws balls for her. And when the guys don't go out far enough, he says, no, you got to go further. She can get to anything.
I love that. No doubt about it. Well, look, everybody go buy this unbelievable book. Make Me Commissioner.
There she is.
There she is.
There's the beauty shot.
Oh, there it is. Awesome. Modeling for us, of course. Make Me Commissioner. I know what's wrong with baseball and how to fix it. The great author, Jane Leavy, who is the author of the New York Times bestsellers, The Big Fella, Babe Ruth, and the World He Created, The Last Boy, Mickey Mantle, and the End of America's Childhood. And I mentioned Sandy Koufax, A Lefty's Legacy, and of course the comic novel Squeeze Play. She's written for years and years and years for multiple platforms. One of the best in the business, one of my favorite guests through the years. Go get this book online.
You know what's coming?
What's that?
Hanukkah, Christmas.
Indeed. Indeed. Great point. And of course, it's a great time to buy it during the World Series as well. It is Make Me Commissioner, online where books are sold, nearby bookstores, Barnes & Noble, Jane Leavy. Thank you for your time.
And Betty Rue.
That's right. I appreciate the time. Congratulations on another masterpiece here. The interview brought to us by Burn Dairy and RV Source of Central New York. Jane, I'll catch up with you real soon. All the best.
I hope so, Mike. Thank you.
You
Bye-bye.
bet.